In Movies and Money, as the money numbers begin to paint a clear picture of how audiences are responding to the pandemic, studios are finding themselves between a rock and a hard place on how to move forward in 2020. Movie man Erik Childress is on top of all of the action for us. Hello to you, Erik.
Hi, Angie.
What can you tell us?
Just that, Angie, though it seems like they are stuck between a rock and a whole bunch of much larger rocks. But while the studios are wrestling with the dilemma of distribution right now, I would actually say it is theaters that are the ones caught in the aftermath of this avalanche. The numbers on Tenet simply do not suggest any measure of a strong future for the industry, at least for 2020. Warner Brothers was gambling that either things would be under control by mid-July or that enough people would simply feel comfortable enough going back to the movies, but they failed to read the tea leaves as they kept moving Christopher Nolan's film back a couple weeks at a time.
On to Mulan. Disney's streaming experiment has not been nearly as profitable as some would have thought.
Yeah, so there was a story that came out that the streaming release of Mulan on Disney Plus had made $261 million in 12 days. Now, this was based on numbers from an analytics firm estimating the film's viewership. Now, many of us ID'd this as hinky from the get-go, since if the numbers were this good, why hadn't Disney released those numbers themselves? But it turns out, as expected, they were more in the region of 60 to 90 million. Now, compare that to the $100 million that Universal reported for Trolls World Tour for that first weekend of streaming. Now, granted, that was much earlier in the lockdown period and was also cheaper than Mulan's $30 price tag. But I think one could also surmise that Mulan's expectations were a little overblown to begin with, going back to predictions it was headed for an $80 million opening weekend back in March if COVID never happened. Now, flash forward to now when $30 to own Mulan digitally is a bit different than taking your family for a theatrical experience, especially when anyone could wait for it to become part of their regular streaming subscription in a couple of months for no extra charge. One could certainly argue that if Warner Brothers had taken the same tack with Tenet, they may have been able to put up a bigger number and ease some of those studios weary about this transition.
Erik, before you take off, what are your updates about upcoming film schedules?
Well, we did just get some news which broke yesterday from Disney. They have officially moved Marvel's Black Widow back to May 7th of 2021 in an attempt to kick off a whole fresh summer season. Now, that's now a full year from its originally scheduled date and pushes back other titles from its Marvel schedule that were supposed to open in February and on that date. They also moved back Steven Spielberg's adaptation of West Side Story a full year back to December 10th of next year, and are now filling its original December 18th slot with their Fox release of Kenneth Branagh's Death on the Nile, his follow-up to the successful Murder on the Orient Express remake, which was supposed to open on October 23rd. There's also still speculation that Pixar's Soul could be the next to test the Disney Plus streaming waters. And all this comes after a week when Universal, who kicked off the streaming debate in earnest, moved the Crude sequel, A New Age, up an entire month to November 25th, which seemed odd, along with slotting their new Blumhouse thriller Freaky with Vince Vaughn into November 13th. Now, maybe Universal knows something we don't, but Disney's big shift now puts eyes on No Time to Die, the ironically titled James Bond film that I feel is eyeing those Tenet numbers and may eventually say, no thank you.
Thank you, Erik.
Thank you, Angie.
And a sad but worthy mention as we go to break. Chicago Bears Hall of Famer Gale Sayers passed away at the age of 77. He's being remembered by actor Billy Dee. Dee portrayed Sayers in the unforgettable film Brian's Song. More Business First AM. Check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And go to businessfirstam.com for where to see our show on TV.